things forward in this digital world of accounting. As always, brought to you by the Digital Disruptors, and we are continuously trying to push the boundaries in the digital accounting space. I'm your host, and I'm joined by Ryan, which is great to talk through an extension of what we discussed last week, because we very clearly ran out of time to try and fit everything that we wanted to pack into our agenda last week. So we're going to try and see if we can do it this morning, and if not, we'll roll into next week and maybe carry on next week. Of course, always interested in your engagement, so please just chuck things in the chat if you want to ask any questions or got any queries about what we're talking about. Let's crack on, and let's see if we can fit a bit more stuff in this morning, Ryan. Eh?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, we try to hit a huge topic, which is I guess accounting systems, app stacks for accountants, and there's just too much. There's too much to talk about. Where do we get to? Well, I guess we talked about why it's needed. Why accountants now looking at their own internal systems, who can help, like who's out there, who's kind of doing digital transformation for accountants, new businesses that are launched, etc. And then we dived into certain areas. We looked at internal finance and we looked at practice management, but we didn't get to other areas that we knew we wanted to cover, such as CRM, compliance systems. Come on, there's no accountancy firm about compliance systems. And then what would you call traditionally HR, which is now kind of moving into employee experience, which I don't know if that's just a new word for HR, but it seems to be what systems are calling themselves nowadays. And then the benefits of either having internal IT or outsourcing IT and trying to get the blend right, where that's choppy and changing at the moment as accounting firms are addressing things in different ways. So I think we'll try and get through that today.
It is indeed. Yeah, well, again, we'll see what we can squeeze in, because I mean, I guess if we're going to dive straight into the first topic, which is CRM systems, I mean, we could probably talk about that for the next sort of 3 or 4 hours, right? Because it's a mildly controversial topic, especially off the back of talking about practice management solutions and whether or not you need a CRM to go with it, or whether your PM does your CRM, CRM work and all those kind of things. So let's sort of dive into the basics of CRM, Ryan, and talk about why do we think, or at least, or maybe why do you think accounting firms should have a CRM? What kind of specific functions is it going to undertake which are different from the PM solution? And I guess we could maybe roll into towards the end of this sort of like the tricky subject of how you would then integrate those two things, because we're going to be holding similar types of data in some respects.
Yeah, definitely. Look, well, if we go traditional, how did accountants used to win work? And we go back probably 10 years, not even that long ago. It used to mostly be through word of mouth, referrals from existing clients. That has dramatically changed, kind of pivoted into websites to some extent. And then obviously referrals from introducers, which I guess has always been there. But you're getting a lot more traction now through social media. You've got some firms that are pretty much just generating all their work from social media presence. But the websites become more prevalent. And what I guess some firms are doing and using CRM systems incredibly effectively for is to automate that front end. So having a lead come in and some automation kind of establishing with that lead, are we going to be a good fit? Is it worth having a chat? Weeding out those time wasters aren't the right word for it, but those people that are not the right people for your business, right? Because your firm might have a certain price point that doesn't work for other for other clients. So you can automate some aspects there, but in any way, you really need to be tracking it and tracing it all the way through. And one bit that is horribly painful for accountancy firms at the moment is onboarding. And if you've got a really good CRM that then links into an onboarding process, you're reducing your data entry and you're becoming more efficient. And I would say probably, apart from maybe compliance, the onboarding CRM lead tracking side is probably the most inefficient part of an accountancy firm at the moment.
Yeah, I'd tend to agree with that. I think particularly the lead sort of generation, lead tracking side of it, and I think there's also dare I say, a human element of this as well, insofar as talking to some firms which have maybe tried and failed to implement a CRM, is that one of the biggest problems has been actually to get people to use it, particularly, I guess, more senior people who would be more regularly in there. So partners, managers, etc. And also the challenge then of maybe building out a sales pipeline and really showing the reality of the numbers, insofar as you might have one or two partners or managers who are exceptional salespeople and convert 50% of their leads, and you might have one or two partners and managers who are way down at the bottom of the sort of the league table, if you like, and and whether or not whether or not they feel comfortable being sort of shown in those metrics, and also what the potential consequences are of then sort of seeing the reality of those metrics. Because let's be perfectly honest, although we kind of have this view that most people in an accounting professional services firm are sort of salespeople in one way, shape, or form, or at least are advocates or representatives of a firm. Not every person has had sales training, and not everyone is an effective salesperson, if you like, in the traditional sense. And so I think that's one of the very tricky things to kind of get right in a CRM implementation, particularly if you do want to track pipeline. I guess the other bit which you maybe didn't touch on is really sort of more of the traditional marketing function. The kind of the ability to segment a client base, or to segment your contacts and leads and stuff, and to then be able to send direct marketing to them, whether that's traditional newsletters, whether that's e-shots, whether that's something a little bit more exciting. And I suppose a lot of firms have maybe done that with products like MailChimp maybe in the past, or other things, and you can of course then sort of bundle those and integrate them into a traditional CRM as well. So there's a fair old bunch of facets here, isn't there, in terms of what you can do with a CRM. And I think, certainly in my experience of having implemented a CRM in a couple of practices before, but also speaking to other firms, the success or failure of implementing a CRM really rests on, have you got a very clear idea of what your objectives are with implementing a CRM? So is it purely going to be a marketing tool? Is it going to be an onboarding tool? Is it going to be a sales pipeline management system? Is it going to be all three of those, or maybe one or two of those things? And also, how can you get the people part of that right, in terms of getting the right people to engage, the right people to do the right things? Because the other part of a CRM, particularly as part of that onboarding process, is that you're really asking people to be involved in the collection of specific pieces of data for prospects and clients, which maybe traditionally they haven't necessarily been that involved in, because maybe they've had a secretary or a manager or something like that who has collated all of that information through the sales process, which has been in various forms, whether it's in emails or messages or meeting notes and things like that. And it's all fairly unstructured, and all of a sudden now you're saying, actually, do you know what, when you first speak to Ryan, can you put his name into the CRM, and then as you collect his mobile number and then his email address and all of these other things, can you start putting that in there as well on the fly? And that's just not something that people are particularly well used to.
No, when it's manual, and when you're making someone do it where they've got no tangible investment in that, they're just not going to engage. Right? So if you're trying to delegate putting that down to managers, they've got other priorities and they're not really getting anything out of it. You're not holding them to account. They're not going to do it. But I agree with you in the marketing angle. You've got many firms that will have a separate marketing team. They're using a piece of software that doesn't connect into anything that you're doing from an operational perspective. So as information changes, that doesn't then get updated to them automatically, and they're sending out mailings to people that aren't clients anymore. That happens. I've had experiences with accounting firms that have sent it out to people that are dead, and that is incredibly embarrassing. So linking it all in and having a central place that is the trigger point that pushes information down is, that's where we're aiming for perfection, and most firms aren't even close to that. But it is possible. We've talked about this for other industries, other sectors. You can integrate, and it's probably worth touching on some systems that we or firms can use. Like, I guess the generic one that connects into most, but is now pretty expensive, is HubSpot. And I know that we've dabbled that or used that to some extent in the digital disruptors. Do you use that? I can't remember if you use that in your firm, John.
We don't at the moment, but we are intending to sort of roll it out. So we have some of the free elements in use in the marketing team, but not the broader sort of sales pipeline and sort of contact management side of things in there.
Yeah, and I know a system that is used quite heavily is Dynamics 365. That's one that a lot of firms try to roll out. Big beast, not something that's easy to do and has failed a lot of times. But you've got some that are dedicated to the accounting sector as well. If I'm right, Fiber CRM
Yep.
is one of those that now integrates into many of the top-end practice management systems as well. So if you want something that is built for accountants, that's one to explore. But I don't think there's many others that are dedicated to the accounting sector. Are you aware of it?
No, I mean, there isn't, and some of them have sort of come and gone as well. And I think quite often one of the challenges that kind of the CRMs dedicated to the accounting sector, where they maybe come a little bit unstuck, is that quite often they feel a little bit undercooked, I guess, if I'm being sort of honest, in terms of, if you compare them to a Dynamics or a HubSpot or sort of like the more traditional CRMs that people will know and love, is that they don't have all of the functionality, they don't have the sort of broad ability to do maybe the marketing and the contact management and the and pipeline management and all of that functionality. Or if they do, it's kind of a little bit, it's at a very sort of basic level, not maybe at some of the more sophisticated levels. And there are pros and cons of that, because you talked about Dynamics, and it is a beast, and quite often people get really unstuck trying to implement that because it can be so complex, and people then try, it's a traditional kind of like thing, is like, we want to try and adapt it to the systems and processes we have, rather than adapting our systems and processes to the piece of technology. And so we end up with these bespoke add-ons to Dynamics in particular, because you can, and which is madness. And Salesforce is another big beast, which can also be tailored quite a lot, and people get themselves in a right pickle doing that. So yeah, I think that's one of the issues I found with some of the sort of traditional accounting practice CRMs, is that they can be a little bit undercooked. But what they do have is the advantage of integration into, say, the PM solution, which is the challenge that you have if you go with sort of a traditional CRM, trying to then build that into a CCH or into an Iris or a Digita or a Practice Engine or whatever it is that you've got. You might have to then either come up with your own bespoke integration, or figure out a way of manually handing off some of that data between the two systems, which clearly is not ideal, because if you're going to use it as your marketing database and you're mailing ex-clients, that's a sort of a thing that you definitely don't want to be doing, unless you're trying to get those ex-clients back, I guess. But that would be a separate marketing list from the traditional one, I guess.
Definitely. We talked about it in the last show, is that you need to get the core right, and then you build the periphery around it. So once you decide in practice management solution, you also have to consider the other options as you're kind of making that decision. But that will kind of lead into or dictate to some extent what CRM system that you'll work with, whether it be like a HubSpot, a Pipedrive, a Capsule, or a Fiber CRM, or even just the CRM system inside the practice management solution. So nothing should be looked at, and this is something that I'm very passionate about. You shouldn't be looking at a system in isolation. You should also be looking at how does that fit into the overall strategy that we are trying to evolve. You don't need to do it all at once, but you should always be thinking of where you're trying to get to. But we talked for nearly 15 minutes on CRMs. Let's dive into compliance systems. And there's some big changes that are happening now in compliance systems. Let's pick on a big one that I think we've all been waiting for a long time, and it's now starting to arrive, which is CCH iFirm. I know, John, you've seen this more than I have.
Yeah. I mean, well, CCH iFirm is really the CCH's cloud version of the wider CCH suite, and so it's going to be a modular system. So it's going to cover all of the bases. They've already got a couple of products out there, which we talked about on the main podcast. So they've got a confirmation system for audit. They've got a quoting and sort of prospecting tool in there as well, which I think does engagement letters, but don't hold me to that. And then they're starting to sort of roll out, I guess, zero tax equivalent type products at the moment. So accounts production is there, but it's relatively basic. So FRS 105 and I think 102.1A at the moment. Personal tax product is kind of, I don't think that's launched yet, but it's coming fairly soon. And what I've seen of kind of like the demos of that looks very good, actually. And then corporation tax, I think they have started to launch, but again, doesn't do the level of complexity that you get in the standard CCH suite. And look, it's a fascinating place for them to be, given that, what was it, 2 years ago, everyone was taking the mickey out of CCH for those terrible red t-shirts which said the cloud is coming or something like that, or coming to the cloud soon. And it's like, well, you've been saying that for a decade, and what's really happening? But let's be fair to them. They have now got there with some products there. Some I would suggest are better than others. I think where they've got your core competencies around sort of the core compliance products that are already present in the traditional on-prem suite. That's where I see the major benefit and opportunity for them. The other more peripheral stuff, I think, is a bit of a gimmick at the moment. But it looks really promising. It is going to be modular, as I said. They do promise to bring open APIs with this, which means that you don't necessarily have to be tied into the full suite, and you can integrate and go down the best of breed route if you want to. There are some also inherent limitations with some of the products at the moment, insofar as some of them do still need to be connected to CCH Central, which is the on-prem database that sort of is the hub for everything in the traditional suite. But again, those kind of bonds are going to be broken in the future as going forward as part of their plans, their roadmap. And I think their roadmap runs, again, I might get it slightly wrong, but I think their roadmap now runs through to about sort of Q3 of 2026, where they're expecting to sort of have everything up and running and on a par with the traditional suite. And if they can meet that, I mean, that's an incredible turnaround, let's say, for CCH, and would be a real feat compared to what we've seen from some of their competitors who are still struggling to sort of get their cloud products off the ground.
And it's a great kind of loop into them. What are the competitors, John? Because I assume Iris Elements would be one of those that has not quite had the same impact.
Yeah, Iris Elements, I guess, is probably the first sort of big beast that started moving to the cloud. And again, that was moving away from their traditional on-prem suite. And again, they've done exactly the same thing as CCH in some respects. They were building some of the peripheral products that maybe they didn't have in the traditional suite, putting that into the cloud, and then moving their core compliance products across to the cloud. But I think it's fair to say that the feedback that I've seen and what I've seen of some of those products as well has not been great. I mean, I've not been hugely sort of impressed with some of the stuff that's in Iris Elements. I think the pace of development has dropped off as well in terms of bringing that core suite of compliance products into the cloud, and that capability in terms of being able to do not just FRS 105 accounts and 102 1A accounts, but say 102 accounts, consolidations, the more complex stuff, the charity accounting, etc. It's unclear why that sort of pace of change has dropped off, but I think there have been some challenges. And of course, I guess for Iris, traditionally they've been very acquisitive from a technology point of view, and obviously bought products like Center in the past, which was going to be sort of like their core PM solution for Elements, and then that product has effectively gone, and it hasn't really made it into Elements. It's not particularly clear what from that product they've taken into Elements from a practice management point of view. So I think they've almost had a suite of technologies that they thought they could put into the cloud or would be in the cloud, and they could build off, and then almost looks like they've had to sort of rebuild from the ground up, and it's taken them a long time. And I would suggest they have not been as successful as CCH.
Yeah, although I guess time will tell with CCH, right? We'll find out as the products roll out over the next couple of years. But because it's taken so long for some of the core systems to develop, we've got competitors out in the market. So Silverfin's one that focused on work papers, has moved into accounts, and is now kind of developing out that corporation tax element. And Zero Tax has continued to grow and continue to handle compliance on the smaller side. And depending on what size firm you are and the complexity of the clients you have, the likes of Zero Tax may be a good fit, or you might want to upgrade to a fully integrated cloud-based suite as Silverfin. We're seeing more and more traction from that element. Or if you're saying, actually, I can't move everything at once, you may want to hold fire. We're in that transition period at the moment. We're not got enough on the cloud to go, this is the path. You've got to really consider what's your overall strategy and what do I want to change now and what can I hold off on. And part of it might be just looking at it going, when do I need to renew a server? If it's not for 3-4 years, I may as well hold out, stay on the systems I'm on, and then transition. But what I would say is that the accounts compliance side is probably the most forward, the most progressed. Corporation tax and personal tax are less progressed going into the cloud. Is that something you have seen or experienced, John?
Certainly to a degree, I would say. I mean, again, it depends on how you want to kind of play that, because you talked about that strategy, and that's really fundamentally important to practices to consider, because you've got tax systems, which is the old alpha tax guys who do purely corporation tax and nothing else. And their products in the cloud, and it is very, very capable. I'd also say that Silverfin's corporation tax product now is pretty much comprehensive. I mean, it probably, the only thing it doesn't really deal with is kind of like the 1% problems in terms of the really weird nuanced stuff that you would hardly ever come across. And that's where the traditional on-prem suites still have an advantage. But if it's a 1% problem, is it really going to be a problem for a lot of people's client bases? That's the thing to think about. I think the challenge though then is around accounts production. You've got Caseware, really good set of products moving to the cloud, but again, not quite there in terms of capability, capacity, etc. Silverfin, as you mentioned, Zero Tax, as you mentioned, great for FRS 105, 102, 1A, full 102 in Silverfin, but not in Zero Tax. But then if you start to get into things like charities, anything a little bit weird and nuanced outside of the norm, but things that a lot of accounting practices will still look after, again, there's nothing there in terms of templates or accounts production modules for those things, and so the tricky sort of strategic decision, as you say, is like, how long do we sit and wait for either you're one of these existing players or someone else like CCH, for example, to bring that out into their cloud products, and how long do we, or at what point do we have a tipping point and say, right, well, I'm going to move, I don't know, 60% of my accounts production and tax work across to one of these products, and leave the remaining more complex 40% on our existing systems, and then we're going to run two systems side by side, one which is in theory going to be more efficient, more effective than the other one, and then assuming that over a period of time you'll start to shift that 40% across to that newer system. But that is really challenging, particularly as we're now in this more complex, I would say, environment, because we have seen the more traditional players start to move and move effectively, whereas probably, like say, you wind the clock back a year or even a couple of years, and it was just really unclear if we were ever going to see the traditional compliance suites move to the cloud and how effective that was going to be. So it is a difficult choice. I'd suggest for smaller firms, those choices are probably a little bit easier, and for larger firms. Also, I think one of the other things, which is sort of slightly going off in a bit of a tangent, but one of the things that we're starting to see larger firms think about, and it sits alongside that consideration of, do our servers have another 3 or 5 years left in them, or are we sort of like putting a sticking plaster over them and we really need to get rid of them in the next 6 to 12 months? But we're seeing firms investing quite a lot in like core infrastructure, the technology, the hardware that we give to our users, but also things like cyber. That's really high on the agenda for a lot of firms, particularly sort of larger firms, I'd suggest, and that's where a reasonable amount of investment's going. And I think that kind of gives anyone thinking about moving to a cloud suite for accounts production or tax or whatever it might be, an opportunity to maybe sort of put that on the back burner a little bit. One area I would say is like personal tax in particular. There isn't anything really good online, on the cloud for personal tax products. And from our point of view, our strategic point of view, we're actually sort of looking at CCH as maybe being the solution to that problem, because Silverfin aren't developing it. Zero Tax have it, but it's not great. Tax systems that I mentioned aren't building personal tax products, as far as I'm aware. So we're going to be relying on an Iris, a CCH, a Digita, a Bright Group, or someone else, KPM or someone else like that, to build a product, a personal tax product, sorry, that's going to be sophisticated enough and complex enough to deal with not just kind of the fairly vanilla tax returns that a lot of people do, but the more complex stuff that we'll do including things like trusts and all of the stuff that kind of falls into that periphery. And I guess, sorry, I will shut up in a minute, but I guess alongside all of that, we've got these MTD personal tax or income tax considerations that go with it, right? In terms of like, there's going to be a huge amount of change coming into this marketplace as a consequence of those requirements, and so it's not even simple for the vendors kind of like be thinking about this, because they've got to think about how do we play nicely with a multitude of bookkeeping solutions, or do we bring our own bookkeeping solution to be able to comply with the quarterly reporting requirements, and how does that start to fit together? So there's a massive complexity there at the moment.
I mean, that makes it very clear that this is by far the most challenging area to resolve for accountancy firms at the moment. And I don't think there is a given, this is the path. This is kind of it's subjective to you. Where are you in this journey? Do we pause? Do we move now? Do you do a hybrid, as John said? You really need to talk to people, understand what's out there, and see kind of where you are strategically at this point. But let's move away from something so heavy as compliance systems and something more joyful, which is HR and I guess employee experience tools. And this shouldn't be a huge topic. This is an area we just want to touch on, in that traditionally HR is something that's either dealt with by one person's machine or a filing cabinet, or maybe even a very separate but cloud-based HR tool. But where things are going are fully integrated HR and payroll system that connects into your finance. And the main reason for this is about security. It's about GDPR control. It's about keeping one locked down area for your most sensitive data, which is on your employees. So there's a few in this. We've talked about it before. You've got the likes of Employment Hero. You've got Rippling, which is coming across from the US, massive impact in the US, which is relatively new to the UK. And you also had HireBob of recently acquired Pento, great payroll system that we're going to see them integrate into. And if you've not come across HireBob, it's one of the market leading employee experience tools. They've kind of taken HR and rebranded it, and now other systems are following those. Is there anything else that, I guess actually one that probably was the original on this, used to be Citrus HR, now Safe HR, I believe it's called, probably better focused for those smaller firms. It's simpler, but it does pretty much all you want, and has the ability to overlay that with HR advice at a cost-effective way. But have you come across anything else, John? Because these are the main ones that I've seen in my research, but obviously I'm just in my bubble.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other one that's worth sort of talking about is Perkbox. Not really a HR solution, but it is kind of like the employee experience kind of solution that we alluded to at the beginning. And I know a lot of firms have kind of looked at that, or similar products, and there are a bunch of similar products on the market now as well, and sort of maybe bolted that on alongside their HR system. And this is where we started, like you say, we were starting to see this blending, aren't we, of products like HireBob and Employment Hero, traditional, not traditional, but HR solutions now bringing in kind of some more of this employee experience stuff, the ability to provide incentives to staff, or even for a firm to offer a set of solutions or remuneration incentives around salary sacrifice and all sorts of other things, in a way that's easier to manage and handle, rather than having to go through lots of different portals and solutions. And I guess in the context of what we saw in the budget the other day, with employers NI going up and the thresholds changing and everything else, is I think we're going to see quite a lot more salary sacrifice type schemes and arrangement coming into organizations, or at least we should be talking to our clients about these kind of things as a way to mitigate that increased cost, because salary sacrifice is a really great way of getting all sorts of things into your employees at relatively low cost, with a great level of incentive, whether that's simple stuff like pension contributions, or maybe even electric vehicles or cycle to work scheme, those kind of traditional things. But there is a plethora of things that you can do around the outside of that, which is relatively easy to implement now.
Definitely, and I should probably actually just add a few more in here, which it'd be wrong to not mention. So Staffology is a big one, because it's it's been acquired by Iris, but I think they've made it then our premium payroll and HR solution. And the payroll is really good from everything I've looked at. HR is a bit more traditional. but it depends what you need. So that may be a good fit. And obviously you've got Sage with their new cloud-based payroll and HR. Some limitations on scale you can get with that system. And then you've got QuickBooks, which has kind of overlaid over the top of the Employment Hero system, badged it up in theirs, and I've refined it, made it a bit more Intuit based. But if you are an Intuit or QuickBooks based firm, that's probably a system you'd want to consider. Now, I know, John, that we wanted to also discuss internal versus external IT, but I think we should probably park this moot onto the next episode, given we've only got like a minute to go. So from my perspective, I think we've deep dived into a lot of areas. If you've just picked up this one, you've not listened to the last show, then definitely go and listen to that and tune in for the next one where we'll finish this.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. I think the whistle stop tour as usual, and as we said, we can get into lots of these topics for a lot longer. But let's wrap that up. I think it's a great place to wrap up. We will definitely cover some more things next week, but hopefully, this episode has provided you with valuable insights for you to take forward. Make sure you check out the show notes and links to Digital Disruptors and everything else that we're doing at the moment, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or look out for us on LinkedIn to make sure you capture all of the future episodes and the past ones as well, if you want to go back and see what we've been talking about in the past. And we're always going to be here on Thursday morning, so we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Awesome. That's one, mate.